Hey, legend. Thank you for hanging out with me today. If you're a leader who's been telling yourself that once things settle down, you'll start to feel like yourself again, then this episode is absolutely for you because most leaders look at resilience through the lens of pushing through, holding it together, getting back to where you were. And this is often the very thing keeping strong leaders stuck because the way they're trying to recover no longer matches who they've already become. In this episode, I want to show you the difference between resilience and anti-fragility and why trying to get back to who you were can actually work against your growth as a leader. So let's get cracking. Number one is when your capacity has grown, but your identity hasn't updated yet. One of the most common things that happens to strong leaders is that their capacity expands under pressure, but the way they see themselves and how they operate stays anchored in an older version of who they were. So even though they're now handling more complexity, more responsibility, and more uncertainty than ever before, they still second guess decisions, tolerate unnecessary friction, or move cautiously in places where they no longer need to. What this looks like in practice is a leader who is clearly capable, clearly experienced, but still operating with an internal handbrake on because their self-trust hasn't caught up to what they've already proven they can handle. Anti-fragility closes that gap. It brings identity into alignment with demonstrated capacity, so decisions, boundaries, and pace start matching who you actually are now versus who you used to be. And I'll expand more on that in number 10. Number two is understanding that resilience isn't simply something you survive, it's something you can leverage. Many leaders think of resilience as something that happens to them, like it's an outcome of getting through something difficult, painful, or demanding. But when resilience stays framed that way, it remains passive. It becomes a story about endurance rather than a tool for leadership. Anti-fragility shifts resilience into something active and usable. Instead of saying, that was tough, but I got through it, the question becomes, what strength did that experience build, and where am I now underutilizing it? For example, a leader who has already navigated major uncertainty often continues to seek excessive reassurance or overanalysis, even though their lived experience shows they can adapt quickly once they move. Anti-fragility teaches leaders to deploy resilience deliberately rather than leaving it behind as a badge of survival. Number three is knowing that if something no longer rattles you, your decisions should change. Emotional growth is not meant to be abstract or internal only. If you are genuinely less reactive, less emotionally hooked, or less destabilized by certain situations, that growth should be clearly reflected in how you decide and how efficiently and effectively you act. What often happens instead is that leaders grow emotionally but keep making decisions as if they still need to protect themselves from things that no longer have real power over them. That might look like over explaining decisions, delaying calls that are already clear, and continuing to tolerate dynamics they've emotionally outgrown. Anti-fragility insists that emotional maturity earns operational authority, and if it doesn't rattle you anymore, then clarity and action should follow. Number four is understanding that tolerance is not neutral. It actually drains leadership energy. Tolerance is often framed as patience, maturity, or professionalism, but in reality, most leaders mistake tolerance as something they put up with, leading to their boundaries being crossed. This isn't because leaders can't handle things, but because they often tolerate outdated systems, misaligned relationships, inefficient structures, or recurring friction because it's manageable or it's not the worst problem. What the nervous system knows and what the anti-fragility pressure test surfaces is that tolerating something that no longer fits costs more energy than addressing it, even when it seems easier in the short term. Anti-fragility doesn't push leaders to become rigid or aggressive. It simply asks, why am I still operating from a place and tolerating something my system has already flagged as unsustainable? Removing tolerance is not confrontation. It's leadership integrity that's catching up to your capacity to operate from a more anti-fragile stance. Number 5 is understanding that calm under pressure comes from structure, not willpower. Many leaders believe calm is a personality trait and something you either have or you don't, which is not true, because even the most calm of people can have a breaking point, meaning you can grow this skill and adapt. I'll give you an example. So when you look closely, calm under pressure almost always appears in very specific conditions. When roles are clear, when people take accountability for their decisions and own their actions, and when boundaries are defined. When those conditions are not present, even the most capable leaders feel scattered, reactive, or mentally overloaded. When I work with my clients utilizing the fire pit inner resilience compass framework, anti-fragility focuses on designing environments, an inner system that supports steadiness. Rather than expecting leaders to override their nervous systems through force, it's engineered to help you become more grounded. Number 6 is knowing that you can utilize decisions to strengthen you after you make them. Leaders are often taught to wait for certainty, confidence, or emotional calm before making a decision and tie themselves in knots, worried about the outcome of a right or wrong decision. In reality, many of the strongest decisions don't feel fully settled beforehand. Anti-fragility trains leaders to recognize these pre and post-decision signals as data, not coincidence. Think about when you've made a decision that's gone against your core values. Notice how you feel in that moment. Notice what you thought about. Notice that gut feeling that you ignored. Now take a moment to think about decisions that you were still nervous about, but they felt in alignment with you. How did you feel in that moment of saying yes or no? What were your thoughts? What gut feeling signs did you see that you chose to listen to? Over time, this dramatically reduces hesitation because leaders learn to trust how their system responds when a decision is congruent rather than demanding perfect certainty in advance. Number 7 is the ability to support others without rescuing them. This is a core anti-fragile leadership skill. One of the most misunderstood shifts leaders make as they grow is the move away from rescuing, and it's often resisted because rescuing feels like care, responsibility, and leadership. And to be clear, anti-fragility is not about withdrawing support, becoming distant, or refusing to help people. Strong leaders still support, mentor, and guide, often more effectively than before. The difference is how that support is delivered. Rescuing typically looks like stepping in too early, absorbing consequences that are not yours to carry, or stabilizing situations in ways that prevent others or systems from adapting. Over time, this creates dependency, blurs accountability, and drains leadership capacity. Support, on the other hand, maintains clear ownership. An anti-fragile leader doesn't remove the challenge, they stay present while others step up and meet that challenge. The leader remains engaged, available, and grounded, but the responsibility stays where it belongs to enable anti-fragile growth for both the leader and the person the leader is supporting. This kind of support builds capability instead of dependence. It protects the leader's energy and strengthens trust on both sides and increases self-integrity in each of them. Anti-fragility brings clear expectations, consequences, and consistency. Over time, this is what creates teams and systems that are stronger, more adaptive, and less reliant on constant intervention. Number 8 is understanding that as leaders get stronger in their anti-fragility, they gain more clarity in life. One of the clearest signals that anti-fragility is not being leveraged properly is when leaders become more capable, but their lives and businesses become more complex than necessary. They're stronger, yet still carrying outdated processes, unnecessary meetings, legacy responsibilities, and emotional labor that no longer belongs to them. Anti-fragility ensures that strength empowers and leads to more efficiency and straightforwardness when resolving issues. Number 9 is knowing that durability outperforms high intensity at higher levels of responsibility. High intensity can be useful and can mobilize energy. It can push something over the line with effort and sometimes force, or it can get traction during short bursts of pressure. But high intensity is not a sustainable operating model for leadership at scale. Leaders who rely on high intensity tend to run hot emotionally, mentally, or relationally. And while that may work for a season, it eventually creates instability. Not because the leader isn't capable, but because high intensity always demands recovery, and higher levels of responsibility often don't allow enough space for that recovery to happen unless it's specifically designed to do so. Durability is different, and this is where it's often misunderstood. Durability does not mean tolerating poor systems, misaligned relationships, or ongoing friction in the name of being strong. It does not mean pushing through environments that your nervous system is screaming stop. And it absolutely does not mean carrying things that should have been redesigned, delegated, or addressed. Durability is not about putting up with more. It's about operating in a way that doesn't require you to feel like you have to constantly recover from the emotional roller coaster. An anti-fragile leader builds durability by setting operating standards that reduce unnecessary strain, making decisions earlier instead of carrying unresolved tension, by removing tolerance where it drains energy, and designing structures that support steady output instead of emotional roller coaster spikes. For example, a durable leader doesn't pride themselves on being available at all hours or absorbing every issue without impact. Instead, they establish clear boundaries around access, decision ownership, and escalation, not because they can't handle pressure, but because they refuse to rely on adrenaline as a leadership strategy. This allows energy to remain consistent rather than volatile, and clarity to remain accessible even under sustained load. Anti-fragility prioritizes durability because it supports consistent energy rather than burnout cycles, reliable recovery instead of prolonged depletion, and steady decision making without emotional and mental erosion. This is what allows leaders to carry responsibility without sacrificing health, clarity, or integrity, and without mistaking tolerance for strength. Number 10 is understanding that identity is not a destination and that it's an ongoing calibration that accelerates results. One of the most subtle traps leaders fall into is believing that identity needs to be fully upgraded before they can act differently, scale effectively, or access greater anti-fragility, as if there's some final version of themselves they need to arrive at first, and only then will momentum come online. That's not how growth works in real leadership. Identity is not a static achievement. It's a continuously updating reference point shaped by lived experience, pressure, decisions, and recovery over time. Anti-fragility doesn't require you to wait for identity to upgrade before results appear. It allows identity and results to develop and grow together, reinforcing each other. Leaders often get stuck and sense that their identity is shifting. For example, they know they're stronger, more discerning, more capable than they used to be, but they hesitate to act from that strength until it feels more solid or complete. So they delay firmer decisions, clearer boundaries, and bolder simplifications, not because they can't handle the outcome, but because they're still referencing an older internal version of themselves when deciding what's permissible. This creates an artificial pause in growth. In anti-fragile leadership, identity doesn't upgrade first and then allow action. Identity upgrades as a result of acting from emerging strength. For example, a leader doesn't wait until they fully feel like someone who sets strong boundaries. They make a boundary that reflects what they already know to be true and congruent to their values, and the identity update follows naturally. Another example would be a leader doesn't need to be at the top of his game with confidence or self-trust to make a clean decision. They make the decision, observe their steadiness and recovery afterward, and their self-perception updates in real time. This is why anti-fragility compounds. Each aligned action confirms capacity, sharpens discernment, reinforces self-trust, and updates identity. And that updated identity then supports the next decision and action. The Fire Pit Anti-Fragility Pressure Test supports this process by helping leaders see where identity has already updated and where it's simply not being leveraged yet. It doesn't lock you into a fixed self-concept. It gives you a calibration point, a way to regularly bring self-perception back into alignment with lived capacity. This matters because when leaders understand that identity is dynamic, not final, they stop waiting to be ready. They stop underplaying their strength. They stop delaying efficient decision making. They allow growth to accelerate naturally. Anti-fragility isn't built by arriving at a final version of yourself. It's built by repeatedly updating how you operate as you move forward, using challenges, insight, and lived experience as information to support growth and grounded momentum. Number 11 is knowing that resilience helps you recover and anti-fragility changes how you move forward. One of the biggest challenges leaders face isn't a lack of resilience, it's a misunderstanding of what resilience is meant to do and where its role moves towards anti-fragility. Resilience is essential. It helps you withstand pressure, stabilize after disruption, and keep functioning when things are difficult. But resilience on its own can have leaders feeling stuck. What many leaders unconsciously do is use resilience as a way to get back to where they were, assuming that returning to a previous operating system will restore ease, confidence, or momentum. They exhaust themselves trying to get back to that. The problem is this: the challenge you went through didn't happen all on its own. It happened while you were operating from a specific inner compass. That doesn't mean you failed. It means that your environment, responsibility, or capacity outgrew the way you were operating at the time and things needed to change. When leaders try to get back to who they were, they are often trying to reinstall an operating system that is no longer sufficient for the level they're now playing at. This is where anti-fragility becomes critical. Anti-fragility doesn't ask, how do I recover so I can keep going the same way? It asks, what did this challenge teach me about how I need to operate differently now? Instead of restoring the old baseline, anti-fragility extracts insight from the challenge, updates decision-making standards, sharpens boundaries, recalibrates pace, structure, and self-trust. For example, a leader who burned out under constant over-availability doesn't become anti-fragile by simply resting and returning to the same open-door policy. They become anti-fragile by recognizing that their accessibility model no longer matches their responsibility and changing it. Resilience helps get them back on their feet, and anti-fragility focuses on forward adaptation and ensures they don't walk straight back into the same conditions. This is why leaders who only develop resilience often feel like they are repeating cycles, different challenges, same exhaustion, same friction, same internal tension. And it's why leaders who integrate anti-fragility begin to experience pressure, feeling like it's more informative, gain insights from it versus finding it threatening. Decisions become clearer and more efficient and effective under strain. Fewer things feel too much and growth feels more grounded instead of forced. Anti-fragility doesn't harden leaders, it matures them. It takes what you've already lived and experienced and turns it into a more sustainable and powerful way of operating moving forward. If there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's this: you don't need to become more resilient. You already are. What you may need is to stop trying to return to an operating level that no longer fits who you are and start leading forward from the strength you've already built. Anti-fragility isn't about pushing harder, fixing yourself, or proving anything. It's about recognizing how pressure has already shaped you and allowing that strength to change how you decide, where you hold boundaries, what you no longer tolerate, and how and where you choose to operate from moving forward. The Fire Pit Anti-Fragility Pressure Test exists for that exact reason, not to motivate you, not to diagnose you, but to help you have the conversation with yourself that most leaders keep postponing until they find themselves burned out and making the same decisions that move them away from where they choose to be. The Fire Pit Anti-Fragility Pressure Test is a grounded, honest check-in. You can run annually or quarterly, so your operating compass keeps pace with your capacity, your growth, and without self-betrayal. If something in this episode resonated, trust that. Don't analyze it. Don't talk yourself out of it. You can download the Fire Pit Anti-Fragility Pressure Test right now. The link is in the description. Go grab it now and let it give something back to you. And know this, I'm genuinely honored to be in your corner as you move forward from here.